Hi, I'm Angelo, Mena. I'm from Alexa Real Estate, and today we're going to be talking about fencing issues. Fences are not only the boundary between two different parcels of land, but sometimes they can be the boundary between sanity and insanity. The amount of issues that fences have caused between neighbours are untold. Today we're going to be talking to Lucy Richards from Richards and Evans Commercial Lawyers. Lucy's had plenty of experience in fencing issues, and she's going to tell us some of the things we need to look out for when it comes to fences and your neighbours. Look, thanks Lucy for making the time to speak with us today. First of all, can you tell us a bit about yourself, and then can you tell us a bit about what we need to know about fencing issues?
Thanks, Angelo. Yes, so I've been practicing as a commercial lawyer in Adelaide for nearly 20 years. I have my own practice here at Richards and Evans Commercial Lawyers. I practice with my husband Tom, and we've got a number of other lawyers in the firm, and we specialise in corporate and commercial law. One of the things that comes up a lot in our practice is when we act for commercial investors or residential property buyers, and making sure that the property that they're buying is what they think they're buying. And what I mean by that is, are the dimensions of the property what they think? Is the boundary in the right location? And people might know from their own experience in buying property that one of the documents that you are given as a prospective buyer is a Form 1. And a Form 1 has a number of basic information about the property, and it includes, or it should include, details of the size of the property and the survey plan. It's useful to know that a fence is not the same thing as a boundary, and just because you buy a property with a fence in a particular location, that doesn't always mean that that's where the boundary is. I've had cases where the fences were way off from the boundary and the property was much smaller in actual fact than what they thought it was by definition of where the fences were located. I've also had cases where there was no fence at all, and in fact the area was a carport, and the prospective buyer thought that that's where they'd be parking their car, until we realised that in actual fact the boundary chopped off the carport, so they had no place to park their car at all. The benefit of getting a commercial lawyer involved in this sort of work before the purchase has been effected is that obviously you can spend a little bit of money on a lawyer to get these things sorted out before you spend a lot of money on the purchase. Under our system of Torrens title in South Australia, when you buy property and the title settles in the name of the new buyer, we have a concept of indefeasibility, and what that means is that it's too late to argue about things like where the boundaries should be or whether there was a misrepresentation, in general terms, with the former owner of the property. So people might have heard of the concept of buyer beware. That really does apply in South Australia when people are buying residential or commercial property. And if they're not sure about some of these things, my strong recommendation is go and see a lawyer and make sure it gets checked out before you actually outlay any cash. So I've had quite a number of Fencing Act disputes. The Fencing Act is a piece of legislation which governs the rights and responsibilities of landowners who share an adjoining fence. It also deals with other types of fences, but primarily the biggest area of dispute is boundary fences between neighbours. The Fences Act sets out a process for when there is some level of disagreement about what needs to be done to repair a fence or replace a fence, what sort of materials need to be used and who pays for it. That process requires one neighbour to submit a notice to the other neighbour, and then the other neighbour within 21 days to submit a reply, and it's all very formal. Generally speaking, people don't need legal advice about these sorts of things. They're designed to enable people to do it themselves. Commonly, though, there can be an issue with an encroachment that arises separately to the fencing issue. An encroachment is where somebody's property actually crosses over the boundary and is fixed to someone else's land. An encroachment generally does require legal advice and assistance to resolve. It's a more complex matter than just a fences matter, and commonly they go hand in hand together. I've had a case where the purchasers bought their land about 10 years ago. The back fence off their backyard was set back about 20 metres from the porch, and they just assumed, as you would, that they had a 20-metre long backyard. As it happens, the boundary was correctly positioned about 2 metres off the back porch, and there was nothing on the lawn to designate that that's where the boundary should have been. So we have a situation where a buyer has bought and paid for a house with a 20-metre backyard, but in actual fact what they've ended up with is a house with a 2-metre backyard. And in that scenario, it's really important to go back and see what was in the Form 1. And in this particular matter, the Form 1 was very clear that the boundary was in fact 2 metres off the back porch. So this was a case, unfortunately, of the purchaser and their advisors at the time not reading the materials and understanding. And what that means is that there are limited opportunities for the purchaser to try and get their money back. And unfortunately for them, they've ended up spending a lot of money getting something that they actually haven't ended up with.
All right, Lucy, thanks so much for making the time to tell us some of the issues relating to fences.